Andy from Monterey, California said, in your best estimation, who's the biggest face of sports media? Now that is a loaded question. I got my answer, but I do want to know, before I answer it, this is the kind of question I want to give you a little runway with. Anybody listening or watching, biggest face of sports media today? Not college football media. He said sports media, all of sports media. Who's the biggest face of sports media to you? To me, it came down to two names, really. And a lot of you are going to say Stephen A. Smith. I actually went with two other names. Nothing against Stephen A. I think it is Pat McAfee, and I think it's Scott Van Pelt. Scott Van Pelt is actually my number one for the face of sports media. Scott Van Pelt has done something I don't know that I've ever watched anyone else do. In fairness, no one else has had the opportunity to do this. And what I mean is, Scott Van Pelt, he needs to earmuff himself for a second, was one of my favorites when I was a kid. You see that hairline? And when I was a kid, Scott Van Pelt was on the scene. Well, what does that mean? That means he's been around a long time. But that means Scott Van Pelt has existed in the public arena across the entire expanse of the birth of digital media. The birth of like social media, digital media, streaming. It's so much change happening in that world. So much change about the way people consume sports. So much change about what used to be accepted, what was the norm, what was loved, what was hated. And all that stuff is churned and churned and churned. It's like existing in a hurricane. And he's been a constant. He's been a constant face of sports media, and he's never lost his likability. That is borderline impossible to do. And think about how many people that were prominent in media in general in the 90s and early 2000s did not roll with changes and did not evolve with the times and got left behind. And either they're still around now and viewed as a dinosaur, or they're just not around and you find yourself Googling their name. I wonder what happened to so-and-so. Van Pelt's never been off the front page. And he was born in an era where you literally got your news on the front page of a piece of paper, and now he's still number one, as far as I'm concerned, in his space. And it's 2025. In fact, he's elevated to such a level that he gets to take months off in the summer. He's like a school teacher, just a whole lot better paid. And then the other part of that, I joke about the salary, but I don't know if you guys realize this. Scott Van Pelt's pretty well off financially, as he should be. He's probably still underpaid. Do you know how difficult it is to make the kind of money Scott Van Pelt's made on the stage that Scott Van Pelt's been on for as long as he has, and still be able to go to like Topeka, Kansas and ask people about him, and they would tell you, yeah, he's one of us, man. Like Van Pelt's one of us. He feels like one of us. I'm telling you, it's almost, if not impossible, to do that. The very nature of what success brings you will serve to separate you from the rest of society. Hey, quick time out. Check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. If you're not, make sure you do. It's free. It doesn't obligate you or sign you up for anything. It just helps us keep the channel free. All right, back to the show. Unless you consciously make an effort to remain a part of society. Like Van Pelt doesn't have to implode in on himself in Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport the day after the national title game. Dude could fly private every day and twice on Monday if he wanted to. But he doesn't. And so as a result, and that's just one anecdote, but as a result of that, somehow, I mean, the dude's got way more zeros in his bank account than the rest of America, pretty much, the 99%. And yet the 99% look at him and say, yeah, I relate to that dude. Like, he's one of us. And it's not an act. It's not an act at all. So, like, that to me, that's the face of sports media. And also, some of the biggest criticisms that people have about some of the other big names in sports media, he's avoided completely. And he's got an entire sports center named after him and has for a long time. So, like, my favorite work he did was when he was with Russillo doing the radio show. Like, if I could take, like, a Scott Van Pelt era, I'd take that era even over the Sports Center era of Scott Van Pelt. That was my favorite because I was working in the fabric warehouse at the time. So I'd listen to Cowherd in the morning, and I would listen to Van Pelt and Russillo, and that stretch they had, it was several years, that stretch they had on radio, it was my favorite radio show Oh, I loved it, man. Loved the dynamic. And so he could be around as long as he wants to. I doubt he'll hang around forever, but he could do it as long as he wants to. Then the other side of that coin is Pat McAfee is everywhere. People are probably going to be a little bit more polarized about that than they are Scott Van Pelt. But you got to understand something. You got to understand what Pat means for folks like me. You got to understand that I don't have a J school degree from Northwestern or Syracuse hanging on my wall. And so for a long time, I did not see an entry point for myself. I didn't. I looked and I said, I'd love to do sports media for a living. I have no idea how. And then this entire streaming thing happened. Platforms like YouTube and Facebook, even at the time, they start letting you stream live, and you look at it and say, well, hold on. So it used to be that like overhead and distribution were the barriers of entry for me to get in this business. But now you're holding both of those in your hand if you have a cell phone. And this happened overnight. So that was the gateway for people like me to at least have a shot. Like if I'm really good at all about what I do, and if I could really, engage an audience, well, now I got a shot. And that's the way it turned out. But at every step of the way, you are fighting conventional wisdom. You are the salmon. You're having to swim upstream. You're having to convince management that's invested in terrestrial and linear their entire careers, hey, we need to look at digital. And you get laughed out of the room. They got 35, 40 years experience on you that's telling them you can't monetize that. So like every step of the way, you're having to fight that fight. And then against all odds, you finally make it happen and you're convincing some advertisers, hey, maybe redirect 1 or 2% of your ad spend over here to the digital side. I promise we're going to build an audience. I promise it. I know that life. So to watch him do what he's done on a much bigger scale, you got to understand there are elements of it that you could only appreciate fully if you've had to live that life. And you also got to understand when you have a disruptor in your space, you could either do one of two things. You could be stupid and be envious of it and take shots at it, or you get behind it like they do at Talladega and you could draft. And you need to understand how much money is going to be brought into your space as a result of someone like that doing what he's doing. Sort of a keystone element to that. A keystone species affects the entire ecosystem. Well, a guy like that affects the entire ecosystem. And so, like, for a different reason than Van Pelt, I think maybe Pat McAfee is the other face. You could make the argument for Stephen A. Smith, too. I happen to go those two routes when I'm talking face of sports media.